The moment James O'Neill stepped onto Flight 762, Karen Parker's lips pressed into a tight line. She didn't recognize him, but she didn't need to. His mere presence, his broad-shouldered frame, his confident gait, his dark skin, was enough for her to decide that he didn't belong in first class. Karen had worked as a flight attendant for nearly 15 years. She prided herself on maintaining order, ensuring that everything was just as it should be. But something about this man, this black man, sent a ripple of unease through her. He wasn't like the usual first-class passengers. He didn't fawn over the luxury, nor did he wear the flashy arrogance of an athlete or entertainer. He was calm, composed, and that to her was suspicious. "Sir, I believe you're in the wrong seat," she said, as James settled into 3A. He looked up, eyebrows raised slightly. "I don't think so," he responded, pulling out his boarding pass. Karen barely glanced at it before shaking her head. "There must be a mistake." "There's no mistake," James said, his voice even. Her smile was tight. "May I see some identification?" James exhaled slowly. He had traveled enough to recognize this dance, to hear the unspoken words beneath the surface. He reached into his pocket, handing over his ID. Karen took it, but didn't look at it immediately. Instead, she gave him a scrutinizing glance, as if searching for a flaw, something to justify her growing discomfort. "You understand," she said, voice syrupy with false politeness. "We have certain protocols. It's unusual for—" She stopped just short of saying it. James held her gaze. "Unusual for what?" Her fingers tightened around the ID. "I'll be right back." And with that, she walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the aisle, her heart hammering with certainty. Something wasn't right about that man. Karen stormed toward the galley, ID still clutched in her hand. She needed backup. She found her coworker Lisa pouring coffee. "There's an issue in first class," Karen said, voice low but urgent. Lisa frowned. "What kind of issue?" "There's a passenger who doesn't belong there." Lisa's brow furrowed. "Doesn't belong?" Karen hesitated. I think he might have snuck in." Lisa sighed. "Karen, is his name on the manifest?" "I haven't checked yet, but nothing." Lisa shook her head. "If he has a ticket, it's fine." Karen's jaw clenched. "Just come with me." The two returned to first class, and Karen plastered on a professional smile. "Sir, I'm sorry for the confusion, but I need to verify something with our system." James, who had been quietly checking emails, gave a slow nod. "Go ahead." Karen turned to Lisa. "Could you check his name on the manifest?" Lisa sighed but pulled out the tablet. A few taps later, she looked up. "James O'Neill, seat 3A, everything checks out." Karen's stomach twisted. Lisa turned to James. "I apologize for the inconvenience, Mr. O'Neill." Karen wasn't ready to let it go. "Would you mind showing us your ticket again?" James inhaled sharply, his patience thinning. "You've already checked." Karen folded her arms. "I just want to be thorough." A voice cut through the tension. "You're profiling him." A passenger from across the aisle, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper curls, stared at Karen disapprovingly. I am not," Karen stammered. The woman shook her head. "You saw a black man in first class and assumed he didn't belong." A few murmurs stirred from the other passengers. Some looked annoyed at the delay, others intrigued. James leaned back, silent, letting the moment unfold. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing a minor delay before takeoff. Karen's pulse quickened. If she was going to act, it had to be now. She squared her shoulders and took a breath. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step off the plane while we sort this out." The murmurs erupted into gasps. James's expression remained unreadable. "On what grounds?" Karen floundered. "You're making other passengers uncomfortable." The salt and pepper-haired woman scoffed. "No, you're the only one uncomfortable." Lisa shifted beside Karen, uneasy. "Karen, I don't think—" Karen turned to the cabin door, signaling for security. That was her mistake. The moment the uniformed officer stepped on board, the atmosphere shifted. A younger man near the back pulled out his phone and began recording. Others did the same, whispers turning into an audible wave of disbelief. "This is ridiculous," someone muttered. "I've seen this happen before," another added. "It's racial profiling, plain and simple." A balding businessman in first class, however, seemed to take Karen's side. "They have the right to check," he grumbled. "They have to keep us safe." The salt and pepper-haired woman turned toward him. Safe from what? A man sitting in his assigned seat. James remained still, watching the scene unfold. The security officer cleared his throat. Sir, we received a report that there's an issue with your ticket. James looked him dead in the eye. There's no issue. The flight attendant is mistaken. The officer hesitated. The murmuring in the cabin made it clear that the situation had escalated beyond a simple misunderstanding. A young woman across the aisle turned to James. Do you want us to keep recording? James nodded once. Yes. Karen felt a bead of sweat roll down her back. This wasn't going how she expected. The salt and pepper-haired woman spoke up again. Karen, do you really want to do this? Because I promise you, this will not end well for you. Lisa, still standing beside Karen, whispered, You need to stop. Karen turned toward Lisa, her voice harsh. We can't let passengers dictate policy. Lisa shook her head. This isn't policy. This is you. For the first time, doubt flickered in Karen's chest. But it was too late to back down now. James exhaled and finally stood. The cabin went silent. He adjusted his suit jacket, smoothing out the fabric. I have been patient, he said evenly. I have complied. I have shown my identification, my boarding pass, and yet I am being asked to leave. His gaze swept over the passengers. I will not be leaving. Karen's mouth went dry. The officer shifted uncomfortably. Sir, you just what? James's voice was calm but firm. You have no reason to remove me. Lisa spoke up, her voice surprisingly strong. He's right. Karen whipped around to face her. Lisa! But Lisa didn't back down. I won't be part of this. The tension in the air was suffocating. The recording phones remained raised, capturing every second. The salt and pepper-haired woman smirked. You're about to find out who you just messed with. And in that moment, James pulled out his phone and made a call. Elliot, he said into the phone, his voice carrying through the cabin. I'm on flight 762, and I'm being harassed by your staff. A pause. Karen's heart pounded as she suddenly registered that name. Elliot Gray, the CEO of Orion Enterprises, their airline's biggest corporate client. James nodded as he listened. Yes, I'll hold. Karen's vision swam. Passengers whispered. The balding businessman, who had sided with Karen earlier, now looked extremely uncomfortable. James finally lowered the phone and turned toward Karen, his eyes cold. You don't recognize me, do you? Karen shook her head, throat dry. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her. James O'Neill, CEO, Orion Enterprises. Karen's breath caught. The call ended, and James looked at her one last time. You're going to regret this. The weight of her mistake crashed down on her, and as the first officer approached with an urgent whisper in her ear, likely confirming that corporate had just called the airline, Karen knew her career was over.